Amazing. Well, hello and welcome to the final stop on this year's New Testament journey. I can't believe it. I feel like we've spent quite a lot of time in this room.
Yes. But I mean, I've absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's been amazing, hasn't it?
It's fascinating to me how you kind of do the daily thing, and each individual chapter is food. And there's some chapters that feed you more, you get you more. But then looking also at the 5 or so chapters together brings a whole new thing to it.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
So I've loved it.
Yeah, it's been quite a sweep. And I mean, we're not quite done. We're into Revelation 20, 21 and 22. Final 3 chapters of our journey. Final 3 chapters of the New Testament. Final 3 chapters of the Bible.
And spoiler alert, one of these chapters is the chapter of all of the chapters.
Yeah.
I still am a bit like, I'm not sure.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of curiosity coming in. So, what do we see in these chapters, Tom? What happens in the end?
So, what we've said is that there's loads of imagery, loads of overlapped, interlaced imagery. But here is just kind of the real bared back to the bones. There's a defeat and destruction of the powers and the snake.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing that was started at Eden, the snake who comes in and deceives Adam and Eve, and the whole kind of tragic history, the bitter cocktail of life that was caused by that, they are dealt with and done. That the number one, all of creation, all the heavenly realms and the earthly realms are liberated from the impact of evil. Secondly, that everything and everyone who's collaborated and been sort of on the team, as it were, for that agenda of evil, which is self-sufficiency, arrogance, greed, comparison, all of that is removed and destroyed forever. So there's no potential for another snake to come into the new heavens and the new earth and to say, hey, why don't you eat from apple from that tree? Or symbolically, whatever that looks like. Or a brother to look at another brother and say, am I your keeper? There's no potential for that. There's no self-sufficiency, there's no greed, there's no comparison. Nobody to say, hey, I'm not your keeper. In the new heavens and new earth, we don't want that to go wrong. We don't want to do the whole cycle.
Yeah.
So all of that's destroyed and removed. And so the new creation comes. And that is a creation where, once again, heaven and earth are intermingled. They have become one. God himself walks again in the garden with Adam and Eve, except it's no longer a garden. It's a cultivated city, and God himself is walking in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And this is a specific event which will occur on this earth in the future when Jesus returns.
So let's just labour this a little bit. I mean, this ground that we're stood on now, on the earth, because there is teaching kind of that floats around that everything's going to be screwed up and thrown away, and then something totally brand new is going to come. Yeah.
So again, we just want to go back to the fact that what we're doing here is reading into a 66th book of 65. And the Old Testament gives you language and imagery, which is then used. So in Isaiah says there will be a new heavens and new earth. 65, chapters 65 and 66 says this earth will be rolled up like a scroll, and a new heavens and new earth will come. Now, if you read through what he's saying, is then he also then says, and the trees will clap their hands, and the mountains it'll be levelled out. So there's what he's envisioning prophetically and symbolically is where you can say, yeah, this is the same earth, but actually it's not the same. It's like a whole new thing.
Yeah.
And the new heavens and the new earth, there's a whole renewing because the impact of evil and the corruption that's come is totally done. So if you imagine that somebody's been ill for a long time, or they've kind of let themselves go, and then they go for a makeover.
Yeah.
They're like a whole new woman.
Yeah. Or
a whole new man, or I feel like I've got a whole new house.
Yeah.
That's the thing we're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, is it helpful to think of Jesus post-resurrection?
So helpful. Go on, tell us that.
No, I was just thinking, as we're talking, we 100%. The New Testament points us to the bodily resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
The body that was put on the cross was raised again. And yet, and so it was absolutely him. It was absolutely the same body. And yet there was a sense that others looked at him and didn't quite see him because he was new.
Yeah, and he could do new things.
He could do different things.
He could appear and disappear. But he still ate food.
Yeah.
So, and that's a perfect illustration of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something to look forward to.
So this is so massive and profound in its implications. But this earth, this stuff that you're doing, will be what it is. But it will also be. You'll look at it. Is it the same?
Yeah.
Because it would just be so vibrant and wonderful and incredible.
Yeah, amazing. So the tricky bit that I'd imagine you alluded to, talking through the 1,000 years, the millennium.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about this? Is this a literal? Is this so? Just to kind of give us a bit of a landscape of what the conversation is that we're having here.
Yeah.
There are people who say that I'm pre-millennial, which means that I believe that on this earth, as it currently is, before it's transformed, there will be 1,000-year period of the church being victorious and triumphant.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to come back before that point. He's going to probably sit in Jerusalem on a throne, and he's going to rule as king over the church during that time. And then there's post-millennial, where the church will be triumphant and grow in its influence, and then Jesus will return. And then you get a whole load of, well, I just think, to me, I just can't see any of it in the scriptures, but this rapture idea that the church isn't present and then it is or whatever. So I'm not going to go into all of that.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of, is there going to be a millennium? I mean, I just don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, well, it pushes us into kind of principles for reading the whole thing, doesn't it? But I mean, for me, I remember as a teenager reading the Left Behind series, which obviously has this rapture idea and all those kind of things. And then that was a time in my life I remember batting it around. And I mean, we've said it about quite a few of the books of the New Testament. There's nothing here that the others don't say as well. So that, for me, would be one thing where I hesitate to put too much weight on any interpretation of the millennium. Is that, well, haven't heard it from Paul, haven't heard it from James, haven't heard it from Mark. Now, that doesn't... I don't just tear out the chapter and write it off. But I don't really want to put too much weight. Another principle that we've talked about before is the main and the plain. This to me feels not main, not plain, although there are main and plain bits we want to celebrate in and look to. And that there's the principle of I want to keep learning through my life. I think I referenced it before. Somebody, I heard a kind of throwaway line about Bible-believing Christians. They're people with no questions, and I just reject that. I've got questions, and we've seen a couple of other chapters in our journey where it's like, oh, that's a head scratcher. Melchizedek, what are you doing? This to me is another one. I'm not sure.
I mean, I think if we were forced to land somewhere, I think I would say. The whole idea of rapture, of like a faithful, spirit-filled church being taken off this earth for a period of a tribulation, to me, I think it's just nonsense. I just can't see that.
So that's what you really think.
Yeah, you are. So the Left Behind books, I think, are actually some of the most foolish interpretations of Revelation you can get. It's almost like, I'll pretend there's not 65 books beforehand. I'm just going to read this one book and come up with what I think it must mean. He actually has like physical locusts and things going around stinging people, right? Which is so obviously a reference to the prophet Joel. When he says the armies are going to come in like locusts. And so I think that if you're in that space, look, let's be friends. But I think if you look at the idea of the rapture, that only developed. Nobody believed in this idea that a church was going to be taken away and there's going to be a literal stuff until about the 1830s.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to assume that these guys were all just wrong.
Yeah.
Including the disciples of the disciples. So those who were trained and taught by John, especially, like, they never spoke of anything like this happening. They never expected it.
Yeah.
It's only in the 1830s when this kind of stuff came in. So I think that's tricky to hold.
Yeah.
The idea of Jesus returning and reigning in Jerusalem, exactly what happens with the ethnic Israel, I think there's room there to sort of, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's a good space to think about, but don't get distracted, don't get lost in that space, because this is about you living in faithful endurance, living like the Lamb, loving, serving the people around you, remaining holy, remaining faithful, remaining full of worship for Jesus.
Yeah, that's the firm bits to hang on to, isn't it? I mean, that's a super helpful kind of principle. Again, just what has the church said for 2,000 years? That's it's just helpful, isn't it? It's not that, hey, maybe the church could have been wrong about something for 2,000 years, but you're going to go against it.
I think you'll find it really impossible to find something where there's nobody's thought of this for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And so the question is this: if you're looking and watching things on Revelation, is the thing you're watching and looking to, does it make you fear the future or have hope for the future?
Yeah.
If it's making you fear the future, it's not right. Either you're totally misunderstanding it or they're saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Because never once in any of the New Testament do you ever see any follower of Jesus hearing about the future hope and having anything other than joy. It's all joy.
No.
It's all hope. So if it makes you fearful, it's wrong. Forget it. Just ignore it. The second thing is, does it make you love and equip you to love and serve people? So again, there's been a lot recently through COVID and all that, kind of a lot of content which makes people hate what they see as Babylon, hate what they see as the mark of the beast, hate those who are advocating for a way of life that isn't the follower of Jesus. Now, again, that is never anything that comes out of Revelation. Like, it's always steering you to live like Jesus, to live like the Lamb, to live in faithfulness and love, to win your enemies by loving them and serving them. So again, if anything you're watching or looking at on Revelation turns you to anger or kind of a kind of this sort of about those who are in current manifestation of Babylon, then again, it's wrong. Switch it off. Don't watch it.
Yeah.
Because we love our neighbour to the end in the midst of everything.
Yeah.
And we pray for those who persecute us.
Yeah.
We love our enemy.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And that's what this book is trying to get you to do.
Brilliant. We've used it the last 2 or 3 episodes, but just that picture of we're not in a wedding, foreign language wedding where we've got no idea what's going on, but we've got this order of service and we're saying this is that, this is that, this is that. That's not where we are, is it?
No. It's a pastoral document. It's a thing that's here to say, come on, this is the call of Jesus in this time. Live faithfully, live like the Lamb.
Yeah.
So that's sort of that chapter.
That's that chapter, and then we've got some just glorious.
Yeah. And, I think there's so much in these last chapters, but essentially it's this. It's the Garden of Eden restored and built upon. It's back to where Genesis 1 started, but it's actually something more wonderful than it was in Eden. That's the image. And there's a lot of no mores, which I thought would be quite fun to look at. Yeah. Because these show us nearly everything that we need to know. Yeah. What would the new heavens and the new earth be like? We've talked about it's kind of going to be this place, but it's not going to be like this place. So how is it going to be different? Yeah. And I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 no mores.
So we've got no sea.
So there's not going to be any sea. Now, is that literally no sea? I think that sea, and you see this with Job. Yeah. And you see this actually even in the beginning of the Genesis story, the sea is like a chaos.
Yeah.
And Leviathan in Job is a big character in Hebrew Old Testament thinking.
Yeah.
It's the chaos that is present in the sea, and it's like this dangerous threat that comes against humans.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be present.
That's not going to be
There's
present.
probably going to be water.
There may well be bodies of water.
There'll be whales and fish and
Yeah. About Jewish thought, sea was chaos and death, basically, wasn't it?
yeah. And so when Jesus calms the storm,
Yeah.
he conquers the threat
Yeah.
of the chaos in creation.
Yeah.
So that means no earthquakes, no volcano eruptions, no hurricanes.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Here. No sea.
Dealt with. Amazing. No death.
I mean, you're gonna live forever. You're gonna live forever.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll age either.
Yeah.
Don't think you will. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely no death.
Yeah.
Because aging is isn't it just the death
A
process?
slow death, a slow taking of death.
And Jesus said this, didn't he? Like he said, in the kingdom to come, you'll be like the angels.
Yeah.
You won't die, and therefore you won't have marriage. You won't be given in marriage because you won't need to bear children.
Yeah.
So no death.
Yeah. Which, we're going to rattle through, but it's, it's just phenomenal. I mean, you kind of think too good to be true, but you would believe it if somebody's come back from it. If somebody's shown themselves to have beaten death, we can trust them on it.
And also, I think, whenever you go to a funeral, there is just, I think most people feel this profound sense of, this shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there's something instinctive in humour, it's like, this shouldn't have happened. There's this awful tragedy of death. It's just sort of like this eternity set in the hearts of people. Like, we're not meant to die. You won't die, but it means no undertakers.
Yeah.
No police.
Yeah.
No ambulance service. No NHS. No hospitals.
Yeah.
No beauty or cosmetics industry. I mean, it's a very different world.
And maybe
would it make much difference to you and me, Andy? Cosmetics industry. Will we as we are? But...
We'll be barely recognisable. No more mourning or crying or pain linked with this.
I mean, there'll be memory, I think.
Yeah.
But the memory will be a memory that somehow is utterly redeemed.
Yeah, I mean, what would you call on for that? I agree with you. Partly I think of the Jesus resurrection body again. It's still got the scars.
Yeah.
Which does speak of.
Yeah.
We're not going to have our brains wiped.
No.
Of what happened, and yet we're not going to carry the sorrow.
No.
Which just pushes us to redemption of all things, because there's so many places, you will think of some personally or in your sphere of influence or in history where you're like, well, how on earth could that be turned inside out and not have sorrow for? But it just pushes us to, it will be what it is, but it will be different.
Yeah. 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 So no temple is the next one. Which is actually, of all of them, maybe one of the most profound.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's not true, but it really hits me.
Yeah. Because, I mean, because Eden, in a sense, is a temple, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, this is something that a lot of pundits are saying now. And actually, the temple that was built with the pomegranates on the thing and like the bowl on the waters and it was meant to resemble Eden. And actually, therefore, resemble all of creation.
Yeah.
And so there is no you don't need to go to a building. There won't be a rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. Sorry, there won't be, because what would be the point? Like, God will be everywhere, in everything. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the point of the temple is you go there to meet with God, but He'll be and He'll be in us and with us in a way that is so astonishing and ravishing and delightful. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Again, surprising, or perhaps not. No sun or moon, no night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the sun and the moon thing. It'd be interesting to know whether there may well be a sun in the sky and a moon, and sort of all, obviously, we're not talking about the removal of the rest of the universe. Yeah. What I think this is referring to is the idea that the sun, there's a psalm, isn't there? The sun won't harm you by day and the moon by night. And the idea that there's this constant fluctuation and change occurring in creation. Now, there will be, I think, probably development and advancement in new creation. There will still be that go forth and multiply, steward and grow. So we'll be working and seeing things develop. But I think the idea of sort of potential for harm coming from the fluctuation and change has been removed.
Yeah.
So you go out one day and you plant your seed and it grows, and you go out the next day and you plant your seed and the rains have come wrong and the weather's wrong and it doesn't grow, and that's what's going to be removed.
In this age now, there is often the sense of nature as our enemy,
and that's from the curse in Genesis 3, which is sort of, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but Genesis 3 is you'll be frustrated in your work, but there is no curse. This is the summary of all of this no more. There is no curse any longer. God has removed curse from the earth, which means that your work is always fruitful and your labour is always productive. Those
are those best moments of work. Where you're doing, you feel like you're doing what you were made to do, and it's bearing fruit and it's blessing others. That'll be the state, won't it?
I mean, I must admit, every now and then I watch some of these fishing shows. And that when they're fishing and they're in the water and it's like they're just getting more and more angry, and then they'll catch this. And when they catch this one big fish, there's like that moment of like, this is what I do everything for. And that is going to be the continual experience. That's what I was working for. Always catching the big fish. No gates.
I mean, gates speak of boundaries and in and out and the need for protection. And none of that will be there, will it?
I mean, hopefully what this chapter is seeking to communicate to you and to us is that it is this earth, but it's just so profoundly different. In ways that are, you kind of you can get your thoughts to the edge of it. It's like Moses looking at the promised land. You can kind of stand and look, kind of using these words, you can kind of see in, but you can't quite see in.
I mean, elsewhere in the New Testament, it uses the language of seed, and that's sometimes how I think of it. You look at a seed and you just think, how on earth could that ever become something? Let alone this massive tree. I can't get my head around that. I kind of refuse to believe it. Except it happens all the time. It happens all the time.
And then the final no more is there'll be nothing impure, shameful, or deceitful. And that's just a summary, really, of what Babylon was and stood for, and what the devil ultimately created in the earth. And of course, with him gone, and all those who wanted his way or collaborated, complicit in his way gone, then there'll be no more of that.
And I mean, often with the scripture, there's just this statement of truth. This is how it will be, but kind of implicit in that is there's the invitation. Come and be part of that.
And I mean, that's sort of the image of the river, which is Ezekiel's image, which flows with healing for the nations. So the tree of life is there, and now you can eat from the tree of life because you're no longer the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's no longer a risk because you now have all totally bought into the word of Jesus. We're now defined by him. So we're not looking to make ourselves gods. We're not looking to be self-sufficient or arrogant. We're not. So the tree of life is there, and we can eat its leaves and its fruit. And this river, like the river of Ezekiel, the river of the presence of God, flows endlessly, and the healing for the nations. I mean, it's just like the most wonderful thing. And those moments you get, when you're gathered with other in worship, or in somebody's praying for you in ministry. And I've had some of these moments you can't even describe how, people would call it ecstatic experiences, or these tiny little drops of the river. You get a drop of it. Oh, Imagine what it'd be like to be present in that, with that, co-labouring in that for the rest of eternity. I mean, utterly, utterly captivating as a vision.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's too obvious a question, but this is how the journey finishes. This is how it's left. This is kind of the final statement of the scriptures. It's hope centered around Jesus, isn't it?
And I wonder if, for many of us, we would do well to spend a bit more time thinking about it.
Yeah.
We can, I mean, something that you will often say, Andy, and I think is just so profoundly of the word, is that ultimately we're not living for this life. Like, we're not, Jesus said it's better to go through life maimed than it is to have all your body and not enter the kingdom. Like, there is something that's just, we can lose our life now. We actually did get the reward, Jesus says, at this age, but the real thing we're for is this.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how much in a fairly comfortable, fairly affluent Western church we've lost the emphasis that the New Testament places on this vision of the future.
Yeah. So feed on it. Feed on it. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of close on, finish on, Tom, as we come to the end of the journey and the end of this book?
Well, I just wondered, shall we just end with like a sort of that sweep thing, that journey? You know, when you've been on a good journey, it's like the last night, and you're sat around the dinner table and you're like, oh, do you remember where we started? And of course, like the invitation for you is always like, look where you started. Look, actually, before you, look where God began. And it's this crazy idea that there was this old man who kind of was bankrupt, had no heir, no kids, no anything. And God spoke to him and said, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to make promises to you that I'm going to keep. And you are going to, through you, the whole earth's going to be blessed. And that then bumbled around and seemed up and down. And you get the whole load of prophets who speak to his descendants and say, that promise isn't over. God is going to do this thing. He's going to come and he's going to bring a renewed heavens, new earth. He's going to river and all this kind of stuff of the prophets. And then we started the journey there, didn't we? Then Jesus arrived. And he's like, the kingdom is now. It's happening now. This is the moment where those promises and all that stuff that the prophets saw is happening now. And people looked at him and were like, really? And some saw and followed, and some didn't see and went against him, and the separation occurred. And Jesus manifested a whole new way of life, said those who see and know and are alive will live this way. And he was killed for it, but he rose from the grave, and he said, now I'm filling you are filled with the Spirit to go on living my way of life, the kingdom way of life that's always been promised. That's the way of Abraham. That's the way of the prophets. Go live that now in the midst of a world that will still reject and misunderstand and not want to think it's right. And we saw the journey of how that church began from a tiny little group of people and expanded and spread over the Mediterranean to the point that then at the end of this book, we then see this whole body of people are now still having to deal with the oppression and the rejection and those who are saying no, who are trying to do to the church what happened to Jesus, to kill off the church. And the story ends with us in it. You probably are facing opposition. You probably are facing suffering. You probably are facing rejection. Will you continue to live the way of Jesus? Will you embody his kingdom? Will you be filled with his presence and his spirit and his power? Will you receive all that he is wanting to pour into your life? Will you carry on the baton and pass on the chain to the next generation? And will you have hope, and maybe even in our lifetime, that Jesus will bring this end, as he said he will, where he returns and all that has been wrong, all that began at the Garden of Eden is dealt with, and forever and ever we gaze upon his wonder and his glory, and we work and co-labour with him, stewarding renewed Eden, the New Jerusalem, where he is present with us as a King.